a world where we have everything and it's still not enough, we're often left wondering, is this really it?
Deep inside, you know there's more to life. You're ready to leave behind the old push your way through and claim the deeper, more meaningful life that's calling you.
That's what we invite you to explore with us.
We're your hosts,
Stephanie Allen
and Maren and and this is the Soulful Leader Podcast.
Yay!
Welcome to the Soulful Leader Podcast. I'm Maren, and I'm here with Stephanie. And have you ever had one of those moments where you've worked through something in your life, a way that you are with people, and you step backwards in time because you've stepped back into a relationship, say, for example? Here's an example of what I'm talking about. It's like you go home for the holidays and suddenly you become who you were when you were a teenager or when you were in your 20s, and you're like going through all the same drama and you're like, this isn't me. I know how to not be this person. And yet, because of whatever, all of the situation and the way that maybe it's going back to your old house, you just become that person again. And you kind of look at yourself like, why are you embroiled in this drama? That's not you.
Yeah, like you run a company. You like help other people with their lives or with their health, and here you go back into your family's home and you're a hot mess.
Yeah.
Like, what happens? And how do you recover from that? How do you transcend it without making, I know myself, like I've had those situations. It's like, I'm either going to beat them up and yell at them for not seeing me for who I am.
Right.
Or I'm going to beat myself up for, reacting or not allowing myself to be at peace no matter what. Or, it's just such an interesting dynamic. And I know we're using, holidays or home, but it could be getting together with a bunch of college friends that you haven't seen for years, or, or you're just out of your comfort zone. You're in a different place. And what happens is that it's almost like we age regress back into a younger version of ourselves that doesn't have self-worth, self-esteem, self-image. Like we've lost that part of us, and we're trying to how do I get that me back? That, what's happening to me?
Yeah. I know for myself, I just recently, so for the listeners who haven't been with us for a while, I have a ballroom dance studio, and I have been a dancer, ballroom dancer, swing dancer, country dancer for the last 30 years. And in 2022, I closed the studio. And since 2020, Stephanie and I have been working together and really building this. And just recently, I went back into the dance community. And I was a leader there, top level professional. So it wasn't that I went back into a non-leadership role. What happened was I wanted to consciously go back into my role in that world with awareness. Instead of what we were just talking about, instead of finding myself, well, here's the way that I've always been in with these people, with this community, in this situation, so that's who I'll be. I wanted to go into it with an awareness of, who do I want to be here now? Because I've changed a lot in the last 3, 4, 5 years. And that's the person I want to show up as. I don't want to go back. Like you said, I love that age regression. I don't want to go back to who I was. Not that who I was bad in that situation. It just is, I didn't want that. I wanted to be more conscious. And so
and you've grown and evolved.
Yeah.
So it's like a way of claiming it for ourselves. It's like, wait a minute, I've worked hard to grow and learn and evolve. And there's nothing wrong with who I used to be, but I want to honor who I am now too.
Yeah. And so it started me thinking down this whole rabbit hole of that's also true if I, like you said, if I go into a situation where I'm not comfortable, or I go home for the holidays, or I go, whatever the situation is, how do I bring my present self with presence, who is a leader, who is, like you were talking about, it's like we're such powerful beings. We've accomplished so much in our lives, and then we find ourselves in this situation where we go, "Oh, I'm no one,"
Mm.
right?
So I'm curious, how did it go? Like going back into the dance world after, 4 years of being away from it. What did you notice about yourself? What did you recognize within that?
Oh, I was so I was hired to teach at an event last weekend, and my teaching has changed and evolved, and I I was really being aware in a different way, like a deeper level of awareness of the people around me. And that was one of the things, even throughout my whole dance career, that was one of the things that I was actually very aware of. I was like, I don't want this to be about me. I want this to be about the people around me. And I was a very conscientious teacher and professional along those lines. And so it was very interesting to see it even at another level. Like, oh, there's even more there, right? There's always more that we can do. And that's not a, oh God, there's always more we can do, right? It's actually an exciting thing of like, oh. So that was what I noticed was driving home. I had set an intention for what it was going to look like. Here's what I want to play with this evening, which was that presence that I was just talking about. Being aware of what's going on behind what appears, right? Of
So
for
you
other
were
people.
like witnessing, like almost like witnessing yourself from a deeper level.
Yeah. I was also witnessing the other people from a
Yeah.
deeper level.
Yeah. So like it's almost like I know in some of my worlds people would say, "Well, that sounds like you're out of your body," but that's not at all. You're actually
Mm.
transcending, like you're allowing yourself to not be limited to the body. You're in the body, but you're expanding beyond that to see all perspectives from a place of non-judgment, but out of curiosity and wonder is what it sounds like.
Oh, that's a great way to explain it. Thank you for putting words to what I couldn't. Exactly. And so when I was driving home, I recognized there were some places that I was able to do that, and there were others. I was like, oh, I didn't see that while I was there. I wasn't aware of that. And so I'm kind of excited for the next. I'm like, ooh, I want to try that again, right? So like what is the curiosity, the wonder, the exploration of, oh, how much more can I evolve? And taking that into those places where it feels crunchy, where, we normally do regress to
Hmm.
somebody that we were in the past. Going into it with the awareness, and then it becomes less of the, oh, I have to, and more of the, ooh, I get to.
Yeah, because I think there's a lot of belief that we can't change. Like
Hmm.
that's just who I am, or people don't change. If they're always an ass, they're always going to be an ass, kind of thing, or which is really quite very limiting actually. But it's like we do that to ourselves, is I guess what I'm saying is that it's like,
Mm.
oh, it's too hard. And sometimes I'll find myself regressing into some things like that. And one of the things that I like to use is like, oh, that was the old me. It's kind of like in a movie, if you were filming a movie, you'd say take one, take two. Like, okay, let's do a retake.
Yeah.
Can we do a redo? And to be able to create enough space within yourself to catch it before it's like full on the end of the scene, like to catch yourself mid scene, and go, oh, wait, that's the old me. And just to take a moment for yourself and go, how do I want to be in this moment? What needs to happen, or who do I need to really presence right now? Because I'm feeling that old Stephanie coming up that's 14 that wants to just like fight with her mother
Mm.
and be right and find her space and her place. And it's like, wait a minute, what does that 14-year-old need right now? Sometimes I'll do that. I'm like, that's the old me. That's the 14-year-old me. That's the old me. What does she need right now?
Hmm.
And as if
Why
I'm
is she coming up right
right.
now?
Why is she coming up right now? Because she's obviously, a little bit triggered or a lot triggered sometimes. But it's like, what is she needing right now? And to be able to slow down enough to give yourself that space to self reflect, that takes practice.
It
It
does.
doesn't happen in the moment without practice. I would say you do something when you don't need it, so you'll remember it when you do.
Hmm.
Is it
And
really?
that's, when we were saying earlier that, we've done a lot of work to evolve who we are, that is the practice. And doing it with more intention. So I really am hearing like three levels. One of the things you asked is how do we, how do we do this? How do we become different people when we're back in a situation or we're uncomfortable or whatever? Um, and I'm really experiencing three parts to this. The first is the desire to be a different person, right? The awareness going into it. So if I'm, going into an uncomfortable situation, and here comes the Maren that always goes into an uncomfortable situation, and she's the same person, and I've evolved past that person, and yet I regress back. The intention of like, oh, I recognize that, maybe going out to a bar or going to an interview or going wherever tends to makes me anxious. So I want to do it differently. When I'm going home for the holidays, I want to do that differently. I don't want to get back into the same codependent relationships that we always have or the same argument with uncle whoever.
Mm,
So there's the first piece is saying, yeah, I do want to do that differently, recognizing that normally I don't, and I'm ready. And then the piece that you just mentioned, which is in the moment, recognizing when it spirals out. Because you know what?
yeah.
You will.
Yeah. And to do that with love. Because I
Yes.
think it's really important because we tend to default again the old style. It's like we beat ourselves up. We make ourselves wrong. It's like, oh my gosh, what's wrong with me? Why do I keep doing this? Poor me. Or the blame and shame game, right? Or God, they're
Yeah.
such assholes. They bring out the worst in me. And you blame them and it's like, well, wait a minute, you're part of this too. So yeah, to really be loving and kind with both, with all things, because choosing something new doesn't mean where you're at is wrong or bad.
Mm-hmm.
It's just that we are meant to actually evolve and grow and hopefully become better and better. And that's because that's part of our journey here as beings, as human beings, is that relationship to ourselves, relationship to others, that it's meant to grow and shift and change towards the better. Hopefully at the end of our life we can look back and say, oh my gosh, I made a difference. Oh my gosh, my life had meaning. Oh, I really became a better version of myself. And I don't know if many people take that practice or that time or that self-reflection in the journey of life to sit and look at it and say, well, wait a minute. Am I growing in the direction that is more loving, more kind, more beautiful, more peaceful, more wise? Or am I just constantly reacting all the time?
Mm.
And I'm still kind of stuck in that same old 14-year-old, I don't want to, you can't make me screw you kind of energy. Or why bother? I'm getting old anyway, so I might as well give up.
Right.
I think there's a lot of that. And that part is really hard on ourselves or on others. And that's where I'm suggesting the practice of just when you catch yourself in that to say, what would love do? How could I be more loving in this moment towards myself, towards a situation? I just recently had a situation with someone that, they were being so not rational at all. Like part of me was like, oh my God, like what you want to like do that. You could have had a V8 and you want to pop them on the head and you go like, what? Will you just come back? Because they were totally contradicting themselves. And I just heard inside myself, like, what's the most, I do this a lot. This is my practice. I'll say, what is the most loving thing to do? Is, and what I heard was just let them be in the mess. It's okay. You don't need to rescue them. They're not asking you for help. They're not asking you for your opinion. Just hold space for letting them be uncomfortable right now
Mm.
and don't abandon them. Just love what is, even though Part of me wanted to shake them and
Shake
go,
them,
"Will you
right?
just wake up? Do you hear yourself?" Like I
Do
don't
you
even know
hear
what to say
yourself?
to you right now. But I mean, I can say that about myself too. I'm sure,
Exactly. I was
like what
just
you
thinking that.
like what I said, what you having the witness. I mean, I can say that with myself. And there was that practice of as I'm practicing more loving kindness towards myself and spaciousness towards myself, I had it for this other being.
Mhm.
It doesn't just happen. You have to practice it. And it's not something that we learn in school or from each other for the most part. You really do need to seek it.
And that kind of brings me to the third thing, which is a review process. Because when you set, here's my experience. When I set my intention and I go about, okay, I'm going to do it differently tonight, I invariably get about halfway through and then I fail and I don't do it differently. So when I was driving home from the dance event, I was like, hey, I did it here, 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 and then I lost it. Right. And, that loving kindness of instead of I should have, because like the whole shoulda, woulda, coulda, ought
Yeah.
to, and the shame game, it's it's like a second grader shaming themselves for having second grade reading skills. That's where I am, right? This is
Yeah,
where I
when you're
am in my
learning a new
awareness.
skill, yeah.
I'm learning a new skill. I made an intention of like, I want to learn how to do this differently. So I'm going to do my best to show up. And the first few times I wasn't able to show up at all. And then I started to be able to catch myself in the moment a little bit, and then a little bit more, and then a little bit more. And even with all the practice that I've done, there was still, there were some things that's like, oh, I could have done that differently. Interesting, right? Our teacher has this thing that he says, interesting creation. Instead of, oh, I should have, oh, if only, no, just, hmm, interesting creation. Why'd that, like you said earlier,
Mm.
why did that show up right now? Why did that part of me show up? Why did that person who wanted to shame me show up? Why did that question, whatever?
So I'm hearing you in this too, and I just want to reassure those who are listening because this is a 30-year journey that I've been on with
Mm,
these questions. And in my beginnings of that journey 30 years ago, when someone would say, "So why did this happen?" and what was your part in it? I would immediately go into shame
yeah.
and
Judgment,
judgment and shame and harshness, and I would want to push the person away or tell them, "You just need to go away, get out of my place. Why are you pushing me against this?" Because I didn't know
defensive.
how to do the inquiry with loving kindness.
Yeah.
Like I didn't know how to do that. We are such a society of fix it now, and we're impatient, and we just want the quick $1 million, the lottery ticket, the instant healing. We just want it, and it takes practice. Doesn't mean that those things don't happen, but to really own it. And what I mean by that is to really nurture it and savor it and embody it. That takes a practice. How many people, get an instantaneous healing or a lotto ticket that they win money and the next thing you know it's gone, and then they
Yeah.
beat themselves up even more because we need to have that practice internally of building an awareness of like, okay, sometimes it's like when people meditate, they have, I'll hear this all the time. Oh, I can't meditate. My mind is going all over the place. I'm like, yeah, that's why you need to meditate. That is meditation. The, the,
Right.
the, the actual awareness that you have that your mind is going at is actually the meditation.
Right.
Oh, you thought meditation was this, like this incredible, you know,
Like I was going to sit
holiday
down
or
and hit
something,
hit
right?
bliss
Like,
in a moment,
right.
right?
It's like, that's a fluke. Like, if that happens, fantastic. But very, very rarely does that happen. Often, if it does, it's kind of like your addiction hook to keep you coming back to the meditation.
Right. It's kind of like, life saying to you, yes, come back. Look at how great this is.
Right. It's like you got a taste of it. Now you got to work for it. Now you got to own it. Right. It's that same sort of thing. And so it's not about, and we talk about this in our rational world of achieving the goals and the dopamine hits, right? It's like we want the instant gratification, but we don't know how to work for it. And that working for it doesn't mean you're doing something wrong. It's actually because you're doing something right. You're
Yeah.
building a resonance, you're building an interior state of being that when you have to go back home for your holidays, or you're going to your anniversary party or retirement party, or alumni reunion, whatever it is, that you can hold that state, and that becomes your new that's your new you, right? And you can hold it, and you're not that's this is called resiliency. This is what we
Mm,
talk about, resilience, is that it is an internal practice.
it
And
really
yes, it's going
is.
to add, you're going to be tested in the outer world. That's the only way we can know how we're doing. That's the feedback.
I love that because oftentimes we think of you're going to be tested as a negative
Yeah, like you
and
did something wrong.
like you did something wrong. Oh, that came up because I didn't do this well enough, right? That whole where we're not good enough and it keeps coming up. Instead of, I love what you just said about it's because we did something right.
Yeah.
So as we become stronger and we evolve, different situations come up so that we can own that situation too and the next one. And that's what I think of when I think of this testing in the outside world is it's just another opportunity for me to own my mastery.
Oh, I love that. Yeah.
It's like, oh, there's
Own your
another.
mastery. Yeah.
Hmm. And earlier when you mentioned the overnight healing or the overnight success, those are, when we see them in the outer world, that's really true, rarely true
Hmm.
that was truly an overnight success. Most overnight successes are 20 years in the making because they worked through all of the different places and they owned their mastery.
And such a witness, Maren, too, because no one saw what they did. They only saw
Exactly.
the outer, but there's 20 years of internal working, and no one sees that.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
sometimes we ourselves don't even see it. And I think that's what happens when we get tested when these different things, and then you build those practices so you can look back and go, oh, wait a minute, I see where and it can you can do it with love and humor rather than with blame and shame. It's like, oh my god, I call it a little booger. I go, look at that, it's gross, but you think of like little children, they walk around, their nose is gonna run. It's like, come here, honey, I gotta wipe your nose. It's like everybody else can see the booger, but you can't. But it's okay. It's got to feel uncomfortable. It's like that's kind of what it feels like. It's like, oh, I get to see the little booger and I get to wipe it out. I get to move it, not out of shame and blame, but of like, I caught it. I caught it, and to be
Yeah.
able to catch it sooner. And it's really not that bad. It's really not that bad. And
No.
but we so dramatize it. And
Mm,
sometimes there are so many gifts, there's a
right.
gift of owning it, and learning and becoming aware and conscious, and then there's also something that I would say people are as bad as you need them to be, so you'll become who you're meant to become. Sometimes there's this opportunity to unveil this hidden potential in yourself you didn't even know was there. And if we can look at it as, the old saying, instead of I have to, I get to, or that fascinating creation, interesting creation, or
Mm.
wow, the awareness, the witness of the whole big picture. I was like, okay, this is really cool. I get to do this.
Yeah. It is such a different way of living. And it's literally, you live in a different world than most of the people around you. And it
That's
really
for sure.
is, it's fascinating and there's so much joy. And I guess that's the one thing that I guess the takeaway, if you can do those three steps, the takeaway is that you end up living a life of curiosity and joy and like absolute,
Well, it's playfulness. It's play.
yeah,
It's play. It's not hardship. It's not easy, but it's not hardship.
So the work is, it changes. So what we think of work now of like, oh, it's hard, I need to do it, I have to, da, da, da. It becomes a joyful thing because it is. It's when we were kids, we learned through play and we forgot how to do that as adults. And so it's getting back to that, but from a higher place, where we bring consciousness to it and we choose to learn through play. And I'm going to go play with this.
So lighten up, y'all. That's what
I
you want to
know.
say. Like, just,
Exactly.
let's lighten up and play and take nothing personally.
I love that.
What is that saying? Isn't that the 4 agreements? Take nothing personally, least of all yourself.
Fantastic. Well, thanks so much for diving into this with me, Stephanie. It's been very fun, and hopefully the rest of you enjoyed it. Remember, you can find us on the social media at Facebook and LinkedIn at The Soulful Leader, and you can find us, our podcast website is The Soulful Leader Podcast, and our business website is tslp.life. That stands for The Soulful Leader Project.life. And we would love to hear from you. We would love to work with you. So if you're feeling like you want to reach out to us, please do. We'd love to have you. We'll see you all next week on the Soulful Leader Podcast.
And that wraps up another episode of the Soulful Leader Podcast with your host, Stephanie Allen
and Maren Oslack. Thank you for listening. If you'd like to dive deeper, head over to our website at thesoulfulleaderpodcast.com.
Until next time.